The North American Society for the Psychology of Sport and Physical Activity, NASPSPA, will celebrate its 50th anniversary in June of 2017. As part of the celebrations, it was decided that we would interview the previous distinguished scholars. My name is Penny McCullough, and today I will be chatting with Dr. Jerry Thomas. Through 2016, NASPSPA has named 24 distinguished scholars. Dr. Jerry Thomas was named a distinguished scholar in 2003. This interview is being conducted in February of 2017. Good afternoon, Dr. Thomas. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Penny? And
very well.
This interview, I hope.
Okay, great. Okay, Dr. Thomas, would you please tell us a little bit about your academic background?
All right. Well, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama originally, and went to Furman University on a football scholarship and got a Bachelor of Arts in Kinesiology at Furman. Then returned to Alabama and did my master's degree in kinesiology at the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa, and then my educational doctorate in kinesiology also at the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa. So that's kind of the academic background I came through.
May I ask, what position did you play in football?
I was a running back. Back then, in the olden days, you played both ways, so I was a running back and defensive back.
Okay, great, thanks. When did you decide to pursue a doctoral degree in kinesiology? You told us you did. And how did you decide what university you would attend? And tell us a little bit about your mentor.
All right. Ruth Reed was a very influential faculty member for me at Furman University, and she pushed several of us to go on to graduate school. So I returned, like I said, originally I was from Birmingham, and so I returned and went down to the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa to do my master's degree. It was convenient, and of course I could pay in-state tuition. And then after I got my master's, I taught several years and then came back and did my doctorate there too.
Okay, and along those lines, tell us a little bit about your first exposure, interest, or involvement in research.
Well, you know, I need to admit up front, the department at Alabama was not a great research department. Willis Baughman was my major professor. He's a former president of AFE, professionally involved. And as I look back on it now, I'm certain Willis would much rather I had president of AFER than all the research that I did. But regardless of that, Willis was a wonderful mentor and supported me all the way through my graduate research. My interest has always been in children, and that was enhanced at Alabama when I got a graduate assistantship teaching elementary PE. Kind of thought I might want to be a football coach, but after working with children, I knew I wanted to do that, and so after I got my master's, I stopped teaching elementary physical education and eventually took that as my research area with skill development and trying to understand that in children.
Yeah, so you carried that interest in children into your doctoral dissertation. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did, and I wouldn't claim my doctoral dissertation was a great piece of work, but it was a developmental study that looked at skill development in children across several and related that to academic performance of the children.
Great. So, Dr. Thomas, your distinction of becoming a distinguished scholar of NASPSPA recognizes your long-standing contributions in the areas represented by your research. We would now like you to share some thoughts on your scholarly endeavor. So please tell us a little bit about what sort of research interests you had early on, and if you continued to pursue those over time, or if you changed the research line, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. My research interest, as I said before, has always been children and skill development in children, how it develops, how they perform, what we can do to performance. And then as a secondary area, interested in research methodology. And so it published also a number related to development of good research practice, and particularly ways as research through procedures like meta-analysis. So those have been the areas I'm interested in. I hope what my published research has done, and more the, you know, what you publish your research, but not everybody, and so you have to translate that. And so I hope through some of my other articles and books, things, I've been able to translate what I did into things that were useful for elementary physical education teachers and classroom teachers in the elementary schools.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? How do you, what avenues did you use to try and follow to make sure that your research translated down to the teacher level?
Well,
strategies?
The main thing I did was to publish some more practical papers in journals like JOFR and places like that that I thought those teachers would read. And so I would take the things that I had written as scholarly papers and try to put those into a practical application that public school teachers might read.
Okay, great. Thank you. You kind of already answered this, but the next question, you may not have anything to add, but what's the basic underlying themes or issues in your research? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is skill development, and I've done some work with skill development related to academic, and I do think there's a relationship there, and that some things are interesting. More important, I think, is the development of the skill itself and how that happens. Different age children are able to acquire skill. It's a little different in first graders than it is teaching high school kids, and so trying to help those children mental movement skills so that they can be successful in their everyday lives. How much time young kids spend out doing physicals, and how important that is in their working with other children. And so developing those, I think, is a very important part of their life.
Great, thank you. Well, you've certainly done a lot of research over the years. Think back, and is there any particular work that you're particularly proud of or you feel did make an impact on the field? And were there any other researchers that had any profound influence on you?
And the answer to both those things is yes. I think the single paper that probably had the most effect across the field, at least if you judge by citations, is the meta-analysis with Dr. Karen French on gender differences across age and motor performance that was Psychological Bulletin back in 1985. It has quite a large number of citations to it, and it's probably the most influential paper on other people's scholarship that I've done. Papers that have more influenced the public school teachers themselves, I hope, are the ones I've published in place, like JOFR and the Physical Educator and those types of journals.
Okay, thank you. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with NASPA over the years.
Well, I started out, and of course I mentioned earlier Willis Baughman, who was the president of AFER, and I started the Research Consortium in AFER and was very active in that and was president of that. But then when it was directly in what I did and what I wanted to do, and skill development and psychological factors and those kinds of things. So it was a wonderful organization for me, and I immediately joined NASPA and came to all meetings, became active, was eventually elected president, which I'm very proud of. And so it was really an important organization in my professional and scholarly career.
I remember when it was announced that you were the Distinguished Scholar at one of our meetings. And what does that? What can you think back to that time, and what did being named a Distinguished Scholar of NASPA mean to you?
Well, I got the biggest award NASPA gives, and it was my profession most involved in, and so it was something that was extremely gratifying to me. I've had a number of awards over the years, and I guess I rank that one right at the top of the things are important to me and that I felt influenced what I was doing.
That's great. So do you have any other thoughts that you would like to share, ideas about where the field is going, any guidelines for young professionals, any other thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the young professionals have to, in some sense, make decisions about where they're going, and do they have a good research focus? And that's the critical thing. I scholar, you have to have interesting questions to ask, and to have interesting questions, you have to know a lot about what you're doing. So acquiring the information, not your content area, in my case, it was children's motor skills and how those develop, but the methodology area, so that you can do good research that is publishable in good journals. Then there are two more pieces to that. One is, I think you have an obligation to interpret. Just publishing in Research Quarterly or Psych Bulletin or Journal of Experimental Child Psychology or those kind of places, the only people you get to scholars. Now that's really important, I think, because you guide scholarship in that field. But if you want really matter, you have to publish it somewhere else and talk about it. You have to talk at conferences to the people who do skill acquisition with children. Talking to other researchers is great, and I enjoy doing that, but that does not, or take what you've done, at least in my case, and get it in the hands of the people who need it and who can use it to enhance children's development.
That's great, thank you. So you study skill development. Do you think that's helped your own golf game?
I wish that were true. I love golf, and I play it. I'm not too bad, but my study of skill development has had much influence there. If it did, I'd hit it further than I do.
Well, Dr. We certainly want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us today and just sharing some of your ideas that the membership will be able to follow. So I thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, I'm delighted to do it, and I hope whatever comes out of this, it helps children learn skills, because that's what's important to me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. You have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Penny. Goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hello. Hello. Penny.